My name is Allison Williams. At least, that's who I am now. But my real name, the one I was born with, is Jessica Mace. My life was never easy, not from the very start. I was born into chaos, an unforgiving neighborhood, drugs, poverty, violence. It was everywhere. My parents were addicts. They loved me in their own broken way, but they were completely lost in their addictions. By the time I was 12 years old, I had already seen things that no child should ever witness. Then, one rainy night, everything collapsed. My parents were in a car accident, both high, both gone instantly. And just like that, I was alone in the world. No siblings, no grandparents that I knew, no aunts or uncles in sight. My parents had completely cut themselves off from the rest of their families long before I was even old enough to ask why. Social workers had nowhere to place me. No one stepped forward. Eventually, I was sent to live with a family friend. More like an acquaintance of my parents. It was a crowded home. 4 kids of their own. I was the outsider, always the guest, always in the way. For 3 years, I tried to pretend I belonged. I went to school. I stayed quiet. I tried to be grateful. But every night, I lay in bed feeling like a ghost in someone else's life. At 15, I couldn't take it anymore. One morning, before anyone else woke up, I packed what little I had, slipped out the back door, and disappeared into the streets. The next year was pure survival. I slept wherever I could, bus stations, abandoned buildings, strangers' couches. I learned how to avoid trouble, how to read people, how to stay invisible. Then came the day that changed everything. I met a man named Ray. He approached me one night when I was sitting alone in an alley behind a diner. He offered me food, clothes, shelter. But like most things in life, it came with a price. At first, he acted like he was giving me a job, a way out. He said I could run deliveries for him. It wasn't long before I realized what I was really delivering. Drugs. I was desperate. I was young. And honestly, I didn't see another way. So I agreed. I told myself it was temporary, just enough to save money, get an apartment, build something better. I always dreamed of becoming a fashion designer. I loved to draw. I carried around a sketchbook with me everywhere. I thought, just a little longer, just a little more money. But Ray was part of something much bigger than I realized. By the time I was 20, I was deeply tangled in a full-blown drug organization. And worse, the police were closing in. I heard whispers about arrests, federal investigations, people getting caught. I knew that if I didn't get out soon, I was going down with everyone else. But walking away from an organization like that isn't easy. People who leave don't always stay alive. But I had one advantage. I didn't have anyone. No family, no friends, no real ties. That made me easy to disappear. I took every dollar I had stashed away and paid someone who specialized in making people disappear. Fake documents, new name, new identity, a clean slate. And then I ran. From the West Coast to the East Coast, thousands of miles away from everything that once defined me. That's how Jessica Mace died, and Allison Williams was born. Starting over wasn't easy, even with a new name. After I left the West Coast, I moved across the country to a small town in Virginia. I chose it on purpose, somewhere quiet, stable, and far away from anyone who might recognize my face. For the first few months, I barely left my apartment. I had enough cash to survive, but I knew I needed to build something sustainable, something legitimate. I couldn't afford to raise any red flags. One wrong move, one person too curious, and everything could collapse. I took a job as a cashier at a small boutique clothing store downtown. It wasn't glamorous, but I told myself, small steps, stay under the radar, build a paper trail, become real. The owner, a kind older woman named Evelyn, took a liking to me. She knew nothing about who I really was, of course, but she saw my passion for fashion. I would sketch dresses and designs during my lunch breaks, and one day she noticed. She offered me a chance to help her with merchandising, then with design ideas for the store. For the first time, I felt like I was doing something honest, something I actually loved. It was during one of Evelyn's charity fundraisers that I met Michael. He was charming in a gentle, genuine way I wasn't used to. Not flashy, not aggressive, just kind. He worked as a structural engineer and had lived in town his whole life. No criminal connections, no dark secrets, just a man who saw me, Allison, as a woman worth knowing. We started dating slowly. I was cautious at first, always afraid that my past would somehow find its way into my present. But Michael was patient. He made me feel safe in a way I had never known. A year later, we were married. We bought a small house together. Nothing extravagant, but it was perfect to me. We built a life that was quiet, peaceful, and real. Eventually, we had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and for the first time since I was a child myself, I felt like I belonged somewhere. I wasn't running anymore. I wasn't hiding. I was a mother, a wife, a designer, a small business owner. I had everything I once thought was impossible. But no matter how much time passed, deep inside, I always carried a quiet fear. What if my past somehow finds me? And then, one simple trip would bring my entire world crashing down. Michael, of course, had questions about my past. Any man would. And I did tell him parts of the truth. I told him about my parents, how they were addicts, how they died in a car accident when I was 12. I told him I went into the foster system, how I lived with a distant family friend for a few years before running away. All of that was true. It wasn't hard to share those parts, because those were the pieces of my life I had always carried like open wounds. But I never told him everything. I never spoke about the years I spent after I ran away, the street life, the drug organization, the deliveries, the danger, and especially not the new identity I created when I disappeared. I was terrified that if I told anyone, even Michael, that information would one day come back to haunt me. Not because I didn't trust him, but because the more people who know your secret, the less control you have over it. The fewer people who know, the safer you are. That's how I lived. Even now, so many years later, with children of our own, I kept that part locked inside. But it haunted me. I hated that I still thought like a criminal, that I still carried a survival instinct I should have let go of long ago. Always waiting for something to go wrong, always planning an escape I prayed I would never need. For years, I quietly stashed away a hidden amount of cash in our home, buried deep in a place no one knew about. Not because I wanted to leave, but because I always feared I might have to. And every time I looked at my children's faces, that fear would tighten inside me like a fist. They didn't deserve a mother who lived like this. Michael didn't deserve a wife who carried this weight. Many nights I wanted to sit him down and tell him everything, to confess, to finally let go of the secret that chained me for so long. But I couldn't, because the truth was too big, and if it ever came out, it could destroy everything. So I stayed silent and prayed my past would stay buried forever. But then came the trip that changed everything. There was always one place I never wanted to go back to, the West Coast. It wasn't just the distance. It wasn't just the memories. It was the danger. For years, Michael had talked about taking a big family road trip down the West Coast. He dreamed of it, renting a camper, seeing the national parks, the beaches, all those famous landmarks. It was his version of a perfect adventure. Every time he brought it up, I found a reason to delay it. It's too expensive right now. The kids are still too young for such a long trip. There's too much going on at work. Maybe next summer. I came up with every excuse I could think of, some believable, some desperate. But Michael didn't give up. He started planning it anyway, looking up routes, booking campsites, getting the kids excited, and with every passing day, my anxiety grew heavier. I couldn't explain to him why this trip terrified me. How could I? How do you tell your husband you're scared of being recognized by someone who might know you by a different name? That you fear walking into a gas station or a hotel lobby and locking eyes with someone from a past you've spent years burying? What if we had a minor accident and police got involved? What if there was some random identity check and my fake documents triggered something? What if someone from the old organization saw me? The possibilities haunted me, but eventually I ran out of excuses. Michael could see my hesitation, but he thought it was simply me being overprotective, anxious, maybe nervous about the kids traveling long distances. He kissed my forehead one night and said softly, "Don't worry, honey. This is going to be good for us. A trip of a lifetime." I forced a smile and nodded, but inside I felt sick because I knew this wasn't just a family vacation for me. This was walking straight into the lion's den, and there was no way out. The first few days of the trip were surprisingly normal. We visited beautiful places, national parks, small towns, beaches. Everywhere we went, I stayed hyper-aware, scanning every face, every street corner, searching for any glimpse of my old life. And though some of the places felt familiar, nothing looked quite the same. Stores had changed, streets were rebuilt, people moved on. The world doesn't wait for anyone, not even for ghosts like me. It had been over 10 years since I disappeared, and I started to believe maybe, just maybe, it really was all in the past. Maybe my face had changed enough. Maybe my hair color, my new life, my time away had erased me from everyone's memory. Michael, of course, still had no idea how much I was battling inside. He asked me a few times if I wanted to visit the neighborhood where I grew up, since he knew I was originally from around here. But I calmly reminded him that it wasn't a safe area anymore, that there wasn't anything to see, that it was better for the kids if we just skipped it. He trusted me, like he always did, and slowly I started to relax. For the first time since the trip began, I let my guard down, but that peace didn't last. One evening, we were sitting at a small outdoor restaurant in a quiet town, enjoying dinner as the sun was setting. And then I felt a presence beside me, a voice, familiar and warm, but one I hadn't heard in over a decade. "Oh my God, Jessica!" My entire body froze. I looked up, and standing there was Kayla, a girl I had known during my teenage years, back when I was first living in that broken world I tried so hard to escape. She smiled widely, like we were two old friends reunited. "It's been so long. I can't believe it's really you. How are you? My God, I was heartbroken when your parents passed away." My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear her words. Michael looked up from his plate, confused, glancing between us. I forced an awkward, confused smile. "I'm sorry. I think you've mistaken me for someone else," I said, my voice tight. Kayla laughed gently, waving her hand like I was joking. No, it's you. Jessica Mace, right? You used to live on Clark Street. It's really you. I'm sure of it." I could barely breathe. Michael's confused face turned into concern. I could feel him watching me, waiting for some explanation. "I'm afraid you've got the wrong person," I said again, a little more firmly this time. "Sorry, but I don't know you." Kayla finally hesitated, sensing my unease. She apologized softly and backed away, giving me a strange look as she left. I couldn't even taste my food anymore. Michael didn't ask much in front of the kids, but I could feel his mind spinning, wondering what had just happened. And I knew. This trip was far more dangerous than I had allowed myself to believe. Because if Kayla saw me, who else might recognize me next? That night after dinner, the tension followed us back to the hotel room. The kids were watching a movie in the adjoining room, completely unaware of the storm building in my chest. Michael sat quietly for a while, glancing over at me with a look I knew all too well, that concerned, gentle stare he gave when something didn't make sense. Finally, he spoke. "Allison, who was that woman tonight?" I kept my eyes on my phone, pretending to scroll, trying to control my voice. "I told you, honey. She must have mistaken me for someone else." He nodded slightly, but didn't let it go. "It's just, she seemed really sure. She even knew your parents had passed away. And that street she mentioned, Clark Street, isn't that nearby?" I could feel my heart pounding in my ears. "It's a small town," I said softly. "People assume things. Maybe she knew someone else who lived there. People forget faces, mix people up." Michael didn't argue, but I could tell my answer hadn't convinced him. He didn't press me any further that night. He never liked confrontation, but I saw something shift in his eyes. Doubt. And that terrified me even more than Kayla recognizing me. Because once Michael started asking questions, it was only a matter of time before the answers started unraveling. For the next few days of the trip, I lived in silent panic. Everywhere we went, I scanned the crowds, searching for any familiar faces from my old life. The chances of being recognized were still slim, I kept telling myself. Most people I knew back then were either arrested, disappeared, or far too involved in their own lives to care. And besides, it had been so long, but still, the fear never left me. And as we packed up to head to our next stop, I didn't know that my biggest fear wasn't Kayla or Michael's questions. The real danger was someone far worse, someone who did remember me, someone who hadn't forgotten what I used to be part of, and someone who had been waiting for me to show my face again. For a short while after we got home, life seemed to go back to normal. The trip was over. The danger was behind us, or so I thought. Michael stopped asking questions directly, though I could sense the lingering doubt still quietly hanging between us. He tried to believe me, because that's who Michael was. He always wanted to believe the best in people, even when his gut told him otherwise. But Michael was also no fool. Weeks went by, and then, one night, after the kids went to bed, he asked me to sit down. The look on his face was different this time. Not confused, not curious, cold, heavy, controlled. "Allison," he started, or should I say Jessica? My stomach dropped. He slid a folder across the table. Inside were documents, real ones, birth records, arrest reports, missing persons bulletins, my entire hidden history. I didn't want to believe it, he said softly. But after what happened on the trip, I couldn't stop thinking about it. So I asked someone I trust, an old friend who works with federal law enforcement, to help me check. His voice trembled slightly. And this is what he found. My hands were shaking as I stared at my own forgotten name, staring back at me. Jessica Mace. Everything I had run from, sitting in front of me like a bomb about to explode. I tried to speak, but no words came out. Michael's eyes filled with both heartbreak and anger. "You lied to me, Allison, about who you are, about everything." Tears burned behind my eyes, but I forced myself to respond. I had to. I whispered, "You don't understand what my life was like back then." He shook his head. "You should have told me. I'm your husband. I wanted to protect you, to protect our children. The less you knew, the safer you were." The argument escalated quickly, emotions boiling over from years of buried secrets. And then, in a moment of desperation, I said something I immediately regretted. "If you report me, I'll tell them you illegally used a federal contact to access private files. That's a serious crime too, Michael." His jaw tightened. "And if you threaten me again," he snapped, "I'll walk into the police station tomorrow and give them everything. I will not let my children grow up with a mother hiding from the law." We stared at each other in complete silence. Two people who had once loved each other more than anything, now standing on opposite sides of a war neither of us ever imagined. I cried that entire night. I apologized to Michael again and again. I told him everything I had never dared say before, how scared I had always been, how I thought keeping my secret would protect him and our children. Michael listened quietly, and when I finally stopped speaking, he said something that broke my heart all over again. "I understand why you did it. I understand your fear. But Allison, you should have trusted me. We are a family. You didn't have to carry this alone." For a moment, it almost felt like maybe, just maybe, we could move forward. But that hope didn't last long, because in the back of my mind, the fear never left. Those files still existed. His friend in federal law enforcement still knew. The system still had my real name on record. At any moment, one wrong move could trigger an investigation. One phone call, one small mistake, and everything would collapse. And if that happened, I would be taken away. And I knew I would never see my children again. So once again, I made the impossible decision. I had to run, not because I wanted to, but because it was the only way I could protect my kids from the fallout of my past. I planned carefully. I scheduled a long, beautiful day with my children, one last perfect memory for them. We laughed. We went to the amusement park. We took pictures. I soaked up every second. And when night came, I tucked them into bed like always, kissed them, held them just a little longer. After they fell asleep, I left a letter on the kitchen table for Michael, a full confession, a goodbye, a desperate plea for him to protect them, to let them grow up without the shadow of my past ruining their future. Then, in the middle of the night, I packed my things, took my hidden emergency cash, and disappeared. Again, because deep down, I knew if I stayed any longer, sooner or later, someone would find me. And this time, they wouldn't just take me, they'd destroy my entire family. 1 year. That's how long it had been since I ran again. In the beginning, every second was filled with paranoia. Every knock on the door, every phone call, every unknown number felt like the moment everything would come crashing down. But months passed, and nothing happened. No police, no federal agents, no charges. Eventually, I started to believe that maybe Michael had done what I had hoped, protected me one last time, that he and his federal friend chose to bury my secret, that, despite everything, he had kept my children safe and kept my past hidden. I told myself I had done the right thing by running, that leaving had been the only way to protect them, but the hole inside me never healed. I missed my children every single second, missed their voices, their laughter, the way they hugged me at night. And one day, after a full year of torture, I couldn't help myself. I needed to see them just once. So I drove across the country again, not to return, but simply to look at the life I had left behind. I parked my car on the opposite side of the street from our old house, the house that once held my entire world. And then I saw them. My children ran out the front door, chasing each other on the lawn, their laughter like music that stabbed straight through my heart. A moment later, Michael followed, looking older, but still the man I once loved so deeply. For a second, I smiled through my tears. They looked happy, healthy, safe. But then the door opened again. A woman stepped outside. Someone I didn't recognize. She walked up to Michael, wrapped her arms around him, and kissed him softly. He smiled at her the way he used to smile at me. And in that moment, my heart shattered. Of course he had moved on. He had every right to. He deserved happiness, and my children deserved a mother who could stay, not one who was constantly running. I sat frozen for a few long minutes, unable to breathe, unable to move. Then, finally, I wiped my tears, started the car, and drove away, because deep down, I knew they were better off without me. And sometimes, the most painful kind of love is letting go. Thank you for listening to my story. What is your story? Let me know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and click the notification bell so you won't miss the next story.